Hey, good morning, GibbTVers. Okay, I hope you enjoyed your Memorial Day weekend. I hope you got to take a look at that GibbTV Extra where I visited Pine Grove. It's on the stream if you haven't seen it. Okay, so we're going to go to civil rights, and here's what I want you to do today. I'm posting a form and a timeline. So look at the timeline that I've posted and complete the Google form today. It's about the entire civil rights block, okay? And I just want you to be able to find some information. The two videos that I'm going to share with you guys today as well, I'll attach them after this presentation here when I'm talking. Okay, one of them is on the Montgomery Bus Boycott, the next in our line of major important events, okay? Many of you know about Rosa Parks, and here's some more of the story. The other event that I want to talk about is the desegregation of a high school. In other words, the Supreme Court says Brown versus Board of Education. Everybody's got to go to the school closest to them. And a bunch of teenagers try, and it does not work out well. So I want you to see how the government actually made this happen. We had to do things by force. Just because there's a law doesn't mean people will always follow it, so it had to be forced. Take a look at these two videos. Go ahead with the timeline, finish that up. I'll give you 2 days. And then tomorrow I'll get more into these two topics, okay? So that's what I got for you. Have a good day. It's Tuesday. It's the last week in May. We're getting there, but you got to have this content, and you got to do your work. Okay, bye.
In Montgomery, Alabama, people looked at how they were being impacted negatively by their society, and they assumed responsibility for change.
Joanne Robinson was an English professor at Alabama State University, and she headed up an organization called the Women's Political Council. Joanne Robinson had an episode on the Montgomery bus where she is accosted by a bus driver, and she leaves the bus, in terror. She thought the bus driver was going to hit her as he demanded she sit in the black-only section in an almost empty bus. When she talked to other women in the Women's Political Council about this episode, she found out that they had similar experiences. There were a number of arrests in 1955 of black women who were violating the segregation ordinance on the buses. And on the night of December 1st, when Rosa Parks is arrested, Joanne Robinson springs into action, and they actually execute this plan to initiate a bus boycott.
At the time, most people rode the bus to kind of get around. There weren't as many cars on the road. So you begin to realize that if we don't ride the buses, we are able to kind of break the system to a great degree.
Joanne Robinson comes on campus late that night with a couple of students, runs off 50,000 flyers. The next morning, between classes, they pass out these flyers. She calls a civil rights attorney, Fred Gray. She calls E.D. Nixon, labor organizer, really the recognized leader of Black Montgomery. And they decide to endorse the boycott. They organize the Montgomery Improvement Association to execute and to coordinate the activities surrounding the Montgomery Bus Boycott. And they select this newcomer, Martin Luther King, to head up the Montgomery Improvement Association. Martin Luther King weaves into Montgomery ideas about love and civil disobedience, overcoming adversity.
And the people of Montgomery were willing not only to listen, but to act on this.
I was the NAACP Youth Council president, and I participated in the boycott. I walked to school, and we just saw the empty buses go by because there were no black people on them.
At the time that this movement began here, we had about 50,000 African Americans living in Montgomery, and there were pretty close to 50,000 black people who worked together during this bus boycott.
We stayed off the buses and found other ways to get to where we needed to go.
And so they bought station wagons, and they had an actual route, just like buses have routes.
For several weeks, I was a volunteer driver every day, going out and just hauling people to work or to school.
So people just didn't walk. They rode, but they rode on a system that they created. 382 days. That's a long time. Can you imagine how empowered people felt? It's like, we did what?
The Montgomery Bus Boycott says to the nation that segregation is no longer the law of the land, and that the formula for attacking segregation in all of its facets is going to be nonviolent civil disobedience on one hand and litigation on the other.
The boycott was one of the greatest examples of civic engagement of the 20th century.
Moment, an event that forever altered the course of race relations in America. As our image reveals itself, the 1957 school year is about to begin, and an angry mob is trying to stop 9 black students from entering Central High in Little Rock, Arkansas.
The question I usually get asked is, were we scared? I think initially we didn't anticipate clearly all of the violence and turmoil that occurred. The first day that we attempted to go to school, 8 of us were at one part of the school and Elizabeth Eckford was at another part. And it was the mob that followed Elizabeth. Then you begin to feel that this was a very hostile, violent group of people. Even at that point, I told myself if we didn't go through with it, didn't attend Central and backed out, it would just reinforce the view that the African American community in Little Rock wasn't interested in making a change in things.
During the 1950s, African Americans throughout the country were trying to make their voices heard.
We, the Negro citizens of Montgomery, Alabama, do now and will continue to carry on our mass protest.
The driver demanded that I give this seat up for a white man. I didn't feel that I was being treated as a human being. I refused to give up this seat. I said no.
Little Rock was a year after the Montgomery Bus Boycott. So we had seen the impact of Rosa Parks and the beginning of Dr. King's career, and knew that things could change.
All in favor, let it be known by standing on your feet.
The first step for the Little Rock Nine came in May 1954, when the U.S. Supreme Court issued its opinion in the landmark case Brown versus the Topeka, Kansas Board of Education. Separate but equal was inherently unequal, and integration was now the law of the land. In 1957, this decision and the power of the federal government were tested in Little Rock, Arkansas.
We didn't, at the moment we were selected, have any idea it was going to be as difficult as it turned out to be.
In the face of protests at Central High School, the governor of Arkansas, Orville Faubus, calls out the National Guard. His official reasoning is to preserve the peace and prevent violence.
It clearly wasn't to protect us. It was to make a symbolic stand. It was to protect the way of life in the South, because they barred our entrance.
Hoping to throw open these school doors, President Dwight Eisenhower does the unprecedented. He calls in the 101st Airborne Division of the U.S. Army.
I think President Eisenhower wanted to show that the federal government was supreme in this. And they could have done what they needed to do with 100 troops. But 1,000 paratroopers was really meant to send a message.
Under the guard of the U.S. Army, the students are finally able to do something seemingly very simple: go to school. But it would not be easy for Ernest Green or his 8 fellow black students.
School was like going to war every day. The walks from class to class were where, you had a lot of harassment, a lot of physical violence.
But Ernest Green persevered, becoming the first black graduate of Central High School with the class of 1958. Green would eventually go on to a successful banking career and government service in the Carter administration. But in 1958, integration was not complete in Little Rock. The following year, Governor Faubus closed all public schools in Arkansas instead of complying with desegregation. Schools in Arkansas would not be fully integrated until 1972.